You're seriously going to make me pay to stay there? Clara, it's just a lake house. We're family. Ethan's voice buzzed through my phone with a mix of disbelief and entitlement that instantly made my stomach tighten. I leaned back in my desk chair, staring at the half-finished UI design on my screen, suddenly feeling too drained to care about color palettes or font weights. I'm not making you pay to stay there, I said, doing my best to keep my voice level. I'm asking you to chip in for the utilities while you're using the place. 2 weeks in July, with air conditioning running non-stop. Water for showers, cooking, laundry, those bills add up. Ethan, he scoffed. You're single, no kids, working some fancy tech job from your laptop. Meanwhile, I'm raising 2 kids on a teacher's salary, trying to give them one decent summer memory. And you're nickel and diming me over electricity? I pushed back from the desk and walked toward the window, needing something to ground me. Outside, the Seattle rain was doing its usual gentle tapping against the glass. I breathed in slowly. This isn't about the money, Ethan, I said. It's about respect. That house is mine. I worked for 10 years to afford it. I pay the mortgage, taxes, maintenance, and this summer, you want to use it for 2 weeks. During peak season, without even offering to contribute? It's just sitting empty. Clara, he said, exasperated. What difference does it make if we're there? The bills come anyway. No, they don't, I said. The base costs stay low when no one's there. The bills spike when people are using it. You know that. He was quiet for a beat, then went in for the kill. Mom and Dad think you're being selfish. They said they never raised us to be this stingy with family. Of course, he'd already talked to them. That twist in my gut tightened. I shouldn't have been surprised. Ethan was always good at framing himself as the underdog, overworked single dad doing his best, just trying to give his kids a good life. And me? The childless, upwardly mobile little sister who had more than she needed. Clara doesn't need all that space to herself. I could practically hear Mom saying, Ethan's kids would get so much joy out of it. That's what family is for. It wasn't the first time this had happened, and I had a sinking feeling it wouldn't be the last. I need to get back to work, I said, my tone cooler now. This isn't over, he muttered before hanging up. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then minimized my design file. Instead, I pulled up my calendar. Mid-July, the exact weeks Ethan wanted the lake house. I'd left them open, thinking I might head out there myself, read a few books on the dock, kayak in the early mornings, finally relax after a brutal quarter. Now it felt like I was bracing for war over my own property. And the worst part? I could already feel the guilt creeping in. Growing up, Ethan was always the golden boy, 4 years older than me. He was the firstborn, the dependable one, the one Mom called her little man after Dad started working night shifts at the plant. I was the quiet kid, the one who stayed out of the way. Ethan got the bigger bedroom, the newer bike, the louder praise. When he made the varsity soccer team, the whole family drove across the state to watch his first game. When I won a regional art competition at 14, Mom said, "That's nice, honey," and went back to folding laundry. I didn't resent it, not exactly. That was just the way things were. When Ethan got married right after college, everyone said how responsible he was, settling down so young. When I graduated with honors from a top university and took a job in California, Mom asked, "But you'll come home for Thanksgiving, right?" It was always like that. His choices were noble. Mine were just convenient. After his divorce, Ethan moved back to Michigan with his 2 kids. He was hurting, and I tried to be there. I visited often, brought groceries, watched the boys when he had late-night parent-teacher conferences. I even loaned him $2,000 when his car died. Money I never expected, and never received, back. But somewhere along the way, the help I gave stopped being appreciated. It became expected. When I bought the lake house last year, it was a big deal. I'd been saving for nearly a decade, working long hours, skipping vacations, resisting every impulse purchase in favor of watching my someday cabin fund grow. The place wasn't flashy, a modest 2-bedroom with a creaky dock, but it had a view of Lake Huron that made me feel like I could finally breathe. I remember calling the family to tell them. Jason, our youngest brother, had been genuinely excited. Mom congratulated me, then immediately asked if Ethan and the kids could use it for spring break. They did, and it was fine. Mostly, the towels came back stained. A chair was broken. Ethan waved it off with a laugh. You know how boys are, and said he'd Venmo me for the cleaning fee. He didn't. The second time they stayed. In early June, I returned to find snack wrappers stuffed between couch cushions, footprints on the white duvet, and the fire pit full of charred soda cans. The AC had been left running for days after they'd gone. And again, no apology. No offer to pay. Just, thanks again, sis. You're a lifesaver. Now, he wanted 2 full weeks in July. Prime season, the most expensive time to run that house. And he still hadn't acknowledged the damage from the last 2 visits. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about how invisible I had become in this dynamic. How expected it was that I'd just roll over and say yes. Again and again, because that's what Clara does. That night, I opened the group chat I was part of, the one with my college friends, and vented. Within minutes, they replied with outrage. Girl, you need a boundary. He's weaponizing the family card. Start charging market rate, or send him a utility bill. And that's when the idea hit me. Not as revenge, not to be petty, but because something had to change. And maybe this time, it would. The next morning, I got a text from my cousin Rachel. Hey, just saw Ethan's message in the family chat about the lake house. So excited. Do you want us to bring anything for the 4th of July weekend? I blinked at the screen. Family chat? What family chat? I scrolled through my texts. Nothing. No group thread. No invite. I hadn't even known there was a family chat. I called Jason. Yeah, he said sheepishly when I asked. It's been going for a while. Mostly Mom, Ethan, Rachel, Uncle Steve's side. You're not in it because, well, Ethan said you're busy a lot and probably wouldn't want the notifications. Notifications? I repeated, stunned. Jason, they're planning a vacation to my house. And I'm not even in the group? He hesitated. I thought you knew. Ethan said you offered it. Said you were just working out some small details. The air felt tight around me. I thanked him and hung up. So that was it. Ethan had not only decided my house was his summer getaway, but now he was inviting half the extended family. Without asking. Without even pretending to check with me first. I opened my laptop, my fingers shaking slightly, and began drafting. The document was simple. 1 page. Professional but not cold. I titled it Summer Use Agreement, Huron Lake Property. It outlined 3 things. A utility fee to cover increased electricity, water, and trash service during their 2-week stay. A refundable security deposit for property damage, calculated based on the average cost of repairs from their last 2 visits. No additional guests without prior written approval. I attached the document to an email and sent it to Ethan. Subject line. About the cabin. No snark. No sarcasm. Just facts. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Are you serious? Ethan's voice was sharp. Incredulous. You're making me sign a contract to stay at your cabin? What is this? An Airbnb? It's a basic agreement, I said calmly. Nothing extreme. It's based on the costs you'll incur while using the property. You're charging me a security deposit? We're family, Clara, and last time, your family broke a chair, stained my towels, and left trash in the fireplace. I replied, so yes, I am. He made a low growl in the back of his throat. I can't believe you're doing this. Mom and Dad are going to lose it. I'm not asking for their approval. I said, this is my property, my rules. You've changed. He spat. No, I said, voice steady. I'm just not playing the same game anymore. I hung up before he could say anything else. An hour later, Mom called. Her voice was sweet, controlled, rehearsed. Hi, sweetheart. Your brother's a bit upset. We were hoping to talk about it. Maybe clear the air before things get too complicated. Happy to talk, I said, as long as it's a 2-way conversation. Of course, she said, too quickly. We're all just worried. Ethan's kids are so excited. It would be a shame if the trip fell through. It's been such a tough year for them. I'm not canceling anything, I said. I'm just asking him to sign a basic agreement and cover the costs they create. But you'd be paying those bills anyway, she said gently. No, Mom, I said, firmer this time. When the house is empty, the bills are minimal. When 5 people live there for 2 weeks, the cost triples. She sighed. Clara, we raised you to be generous. And I am. I've been generous for years. But generosity without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-erasure. There was a pause. I just think, she said slowly, that maybe you're putting money ahead of family. And there it was. The line, the script, the guilt. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My heart was beating too fast. Later that evening, Jason sent me a text. Just a heads up. Ethan shared the agreement in the family group. People are freaking out. Oh, and there's going to be a family dinner Sunday night. Mom said everyone needs to be there. Brace yourself. Sunday came with the weight of expectation pressing down on me like storm clouds. I spent the morning walking through the park near my apartment, trying to collect my thoughts, my composure, my breath. The trees were just beginning to show the fullness of summer. And somewhere in the distance, a father was teaching his daughter how to ride a bike. Laughter, encouragement, wobbling joy. I envied that simplicity. By late afternoon, I was pulling into my parents' driveway in the familiar suburb where we'd all grown up. Their house looked exactly the same, white shutters, blue trim, and Mom's overzealous flower beds bursting with color. Everything looked so unchanged. But something inside me had shifted. Jason was already there, leaning against his car, arms folded. He gave me a nod and a small, encouraging smile. You sure about this? He asked. No, I admitted, but I'm not backing down. We walked in together. The tension in the house was immediate and suffocating. Ethan sat at the end of the dining table, arms crossed, jaw tight. Mom fluttered around the kitchen, trying to act normal, but the stiffness in her movements gave her away. Dad sat silently in his recliner, staring blankly at the muted baseball game on TV. Let's sit, Mom said, forcing a brightness into her voice that fooled no one. The dinner was quiet, forced smiles, surface-level chatter. Nobody mentioned the cabin, not until dessert. Dad cleared his throat as Mom set down a peach cobbler. We need to talk about this lake house situation. Here we go. Ethan showed us the contract you sent, he said, looking at me like I'd committed a federal crime. It's excessive. It's not a contract, I said evenly. It's an agreement, a list of clear expectations. Mom jumped in. It felt cold, Clara, formal, like something you'd send a stranger. This is your brother. Exactly, I said, and because he's my brother, I expected him to respect my property enough not to treat it like a free motel. Ethan leaned forward, eyes flashing. You're seriously going to sit there and act like I've wronged you? After everything I've been through? After everything I've done for this family? Jason let out a breath beside me, low and slow. What have you done for Clara, though? He asked. Ethan turned to him, stunned. Excuse me? I mean, Jason said, calmly, she's loaned you money, watched your kids, let you use the lake house, twice, without complaint. And now, when she sets a boundary, suddenly she's the villain? That's not what this is. Mom interrupted, clearly trying to steer the conversation. We're just saying maybe there's a better way. A more generous way. I have been generous, I said, over and over again. But the more I give, the more is expected. No gratitude, no accountability, just assumption. There was a silence then, heavy and uncomfortable. Look, Ethan finally said, voice rising again. I have 2 kids. I'm trying to give them something normal after a rough few years. You don't understand because you don't have children. And because I don't have children, I said, keeping my tone level, I'm automatically expected to sacrifice my time, my resources, my peace? That's not fair, Mom whispered, eyes darting. No, I said, what's not fair is how you've made Ethan's struggle the center of every family decision. And now that I'm saying, enough, you don't know what to do with it. Ethan opened his mouth to reply, but someone else beat him to it. Grace. She'd been silent the entire evening until now, sitting quietly with a plate of untouched cobbler. But now she looked up, Her expression unreadable. Clara's right. All eyes turned to her. I've stayed quiet because it was easier. She said. But Ethan, you've borrowed my car and kept it for weeks without asking. You've asked me to babysit with no notice. You never help when I ask for anything back. Ethan looked genuinely stunned. I didn't realize. You didn't want to realize. She said. Because it was always easier to assume we'd just keep saying yes. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. As if trying to wake up from a dream. Is this really what's been going on? He asked. Jason nodded. Yeah, for years. Ethan's jaw moved like he wanted to speak. But nothing came out. Mom sat down slowly, her hands folded in her lap. I always thought we were helping Ethan because he needed it more. And maybe he did, I said gently. But helping someone doesn't mean enabling them. And it certainly doesn't mean ignoring everyone else. There was a long silence. Finally, Dad cleared his throat again. Softer this time. We never meant to make you feel unseen. Clara, I know, I said, voice a little shaky now. But I do. And I won't keep pretending I don't. It wasn't victory. It wasn't vindication. It was truth. And for the first time in a long time, it was heard. The week after the dinner passed in a strange, echoing quiet. No texts from Mom. No calls from Ethan. Not even a meme in the group chat from Jason, which was usually his go-to method of emotional temperature checking. I went about my week as usual, meetings, deadlines, grocery runs, but there was a low hum of tension always present. Like static just under the surface. Had I gone too far? Had I finally broken something that couldn't be fixed? By Thursday, I was starting to wonder if the silence was a punishment. A form of passive resistance meant to force me into folding. But I held my ground. Friday morning, I drove up to the lake house to check on some scheduled maintenance. A tree had come down during a windstorm earlier that week, and I wanted to make sure the property hadn't suffered any real damage. When I pulled into the gravel driveway and saw everything intact, the house, the dock, the water shimmering in early summer light, I felt a small wave of relief. This place still brought me peace. As I was sweeping off the back deck, my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Hi, honey, she said carefully. We've all been talking, and we'd like to have another family meeting. Sunday, just us. No drama. Would you be willing to come? I hesitated. Why? I asked, wary. Because we realized we have more to say. She replied. And this time, we want to listen too. I agreed. On Sunday, I walked into the living room of my childhood home to find the whole family gathered, Mom, Dad, Jason, Grace, and Ethan. He looked different, not defensive, not angry, just tired, humbled. Mom motioned for me to sit. Thank you for coming, Dad said. We've had some hard conversations this week. About habits, about fairness, and about listening. Then he looked to Ethan. Ethan shifted in his seat, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and spoke. I owe you an apology. The room went still. I was mad, hurt, embarrassed, honestly, because I thought family was supposed to mean never having to ask. But I've been thinking, maybe that idea of family has only worked for me. Because I've always been the one asking. He paused. I didn't realize how much I'd come to rely on you without ever offering anything back. That's not fair, and it's not right. He reached into a folder beside him and pulled out a document. I've signed your agreement. All of it. Utility fees, security deposit, everything. I also talked to the kids about what it means to respect someone's space, and someone's boundaries. They get it. They even offered to help clean while we're there. He slid a check across the coffee table. It was made out to me. $350. For the last 2 visits. He said, I never paid for the damage. And I should have. My throat tightened. I didn't expect this. I admitted quietly. Ethan nodded. Neither did I. Then Grace chimed in. I'm thinking about drafting something similar for when people borrow my beach condo. Having expectations up front isn't cold. It's smart. Jason raised his hand like we were back in high school. Same for my boat. We all laughed a little. Mom smiled faintly. We've learned a lot, Clara, about how we've treated you, and how we've ignored your boundaries. Dad added, and we're sorry. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Gratitude, sadness, relief. It was overwhelming. Ethan cleared his throat again. I know we made this hard on you. But if you're still okay with us using the house in July, we'll do it right this time. No surprises. No extra guests. No messes left behind. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. Let's do it. Then Mom leaned forward. Just one more thing. Ethan told the kids the trip might not happen. Just in case. We didn't want them to be blindsided. But they're still hoping. And they made something for you. She handed me a folded piece of construction paper. Inside was a hand-drawn picture of the lake house, complete with a tiny kayak and a smiley sun, and scrawled in uneven handwriting. Thank you, Aunt Clara. We promised to be careful. I smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in days. This was progress. Not perfection, but real, tangible progress. The meeting ended on a hopeful note. Ethan and I even shared a brief hug, awkward, tentative, but sincere. Grace offered to bring dessert for the July trip. And Jason volunteered to help mow the lawn before they arrived. That night, I sat on the deck of the lake house. The water calm and glittering under the setting sun. For the first time in a long time, I felt balanced, seen, respected, and maybe most surprising of all, still loved. July came faster than I expected. One morning, I stood at the window of the lake house, coffee in hand, watching Ethan's SUV pull into the driveway. The boys tumbled out first, waving excitedly, followed by Ethan and Grace, who had driven up separately to join for the long weekend. They brought bags of groceries, their own linens, and even a new set of outdoor games for the kids. It was organized, considerate, completely unlike their past visits. And Ethan? He looked different too, less rushed, more intentional. Before the boys could run off toward the dock, he stopped them. What do we do first? He asked. Unload the car and ask Aunt Clara where to put everything, his oldest said, proudly. I stepped out onto the porch, heart full. They didn't just come to vacation. They came to participate. That first evening, as the sun turned the lake gold and the kids skipped rocks from the shore, Ethan grilled dinner while I set the table on the deck. Grace poured lemonade. Jason showed up with a Bluetooth speaker and some bluesy playlist that fit the mood better than any curated summer mix. It was easy, natural, even fun. Later, after the kids had gone to bed, Ethan and I sat by the fire pit, each with a drink in hand. He stared into the flames for a long moment before speaking. You know, he said quietly, when we were kids, I always thought you'd end up needing me. Like, I'd be the one to step in, protect you, help you out. That was the role I'd written for myself. And when life flipped the script, I guess I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't respond right away. Then I said, you did help me. When I was 13 and terrified before my piano recital, you sat in the front row and clapped louder than anyone. I never forgot that. He looked at me, eyes soft. Yeah, and since then, you've helped me 1,000 times. And I've taken it for granted. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. He nodded. From now on, I want to do better. The next morning, I found the boys folding towels without being asked. They'd even drawn up a checklist, complete with boxes, for cleaning before departure. They were calling it the cabin code. I nearly cried when I saw it taped to the fridge. By the end of their 2-week stay, the cabin looked better than when they arrived. Dishes were clean, floors swept, even the lawn had been trimmed. But the real difference? No resentment, no tension, no guilt, just gratitude. On their last night, Ethan handed me a small envelope before leaving. Inside was a thank you note, and another check. For future visits. He'd written, this is what respect looks like. I stood at the porch as their car pulled away, waving at the boys through the rear window. They waved back with both arms like they were trying to hold onto the moment. I went inside, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat in silence. I thought about all the years I'd spent giving in, staying quiet, trying to be the good sister, the one who never made things hard, the one who understood everyone else's struggle but never voiced her own. And then I thought about now. This cabin was still my sanctuary, my pride, my reward after years of pushing through. But it had become something more. A mirror. It reflected what I allowed, what I tolerated, what I believed I deserved. And by choosing to stand up, not just for the cabin, but for myself, I'd changed more than a vacation plan. I'd changed the family dynamic. Maybe even myself. As I watched the lake settle into its quiet evening stillness, I realized something. Respect isn't demanded, it's taught, one boundary at a time. This story reminds us that real family support isn't about giving endlessly without limits, it's about mutual respect, healthy boundaries, and learning to say no when it's necessary. Sometimes, standing up for yourself can feel uncomfortable, but it's the first step toward changing a pattern that no longer serves you. If this story resonated with you, comment 2 below. If it didn't, feel free to comment 7. We'd love to hear your thoughts either way. And if you believe in stories that spark reflection and real conversations, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more.